CommanderX, tough loss, but also a debut in the Overwatch League, and I think there's a lot of emotions currently going through you guys. So, can you walk us a little bit through your preparation and how, in your mind, the match went?
So, in terms of preparation, it's a bit of a weird one, just because the off season was so long. It feels like eons since we last competed. So in a lot of ways, it was very good to get that kind of like out of the way and actually start playing and competing again. I think everyone was very keen for that. In terms of preparation, I think we were kind of in a pretty good position. Obviously, Gladiators played 2 matches last week, which gives us a pretty big advantage in terms of we get to see what they do. And the only like vision they have on us is from that, I forget the name of it, but the Boston tournament we played where we played versus them. And obviously that was a long time ago. So preparation-wise, we felt in a pretty good spot. I think we kind of noticed a change in a lot of teams in this sort of last week of scrims. In terms of, we noticed we've been playing some teams for a while, doing pretty well, and then the teams that played a match in week 1, we noticed when we were playing them since like that first play day, it felt like they kind of almost stepped up. It was like a step up. So I think that's what Gladiators definitely had that today. And maybe that's where we sort of lost a bit out on.
Do you feel like you've gotten some knowledge that you can create the same effect for you guys going into the next match? Maybe even against Houston?
Yeah, I think so. I think from my point of view, obviously I've only seen the sort of live stream. We've not gone through it in much detail. But it felt like a lot of uncharacteristic mistakes. Felt certainly the first 2 maps for sure. We gave them a bit too much respect. Maybe got in our own heads a little bit, and I think that probably hindered us. I think it's kind of good in a way, as good as it can be given the result. But it means like that's happened. Obviously, the debut for I think five of our players. Yeah, that's right. 5 players debuting. No, sorry, 4. Shax, Blase, and Kellex returning, and debuts for the other 4. So it's kind of nice, and that's all out of the way. Yep. And we can just go back to focusing on the game. So we've still got another day to prepare. And then we're playing Houston, who look good. But I think as rough as it is right now, it's still kind of nice to get this out of the way.
Can you explain a little bit the mindset with which you went in? Because on one hand, for months, we heard about the scrimbox that Gladiators had. On the other hand, you have an 0-2 week for that team last week. Didn't look amazing either. So what are your expectations coming into this match? Do you think like, okay, this is a wounded dog, we can take those? Or were you like aware, okay, those dogs are more likely to actually bite?
It was a bit of both. Like we were very much expecting, like when we looked at the Gladiators from the first week, we've already scrimmed them. Obviously, we've avoided scrimming all the teams we're going to play in these opening 2 weeks. So we've already played them, but they looked really scared, which seems very atypical from any Gladiators roster previously, playing like a very sort of slow and passive game. So we expected that to change. I don't think we really expected anything to change like compositionally. So I think for them as well, there was a lot of pressure, right? Because they come in with this star-studded roster, spent a lot of money, a lot of hype. They really can't go 0-3, right? So I think especially like that first map was a real tipping point. Because if they lose that first map, I feel like the momentum is so tremendously in our favor, because they are suddenly thinking, are we really going 0-3? Are we really, out of playoff contention right away? Is this really happening? Whereas from our side, there's less pressure in that sense. Even though it's our first game as a team, there's not that same pressure.
Right. Now, we will talk a little bit about your strategic choices, but how was your mindset coming into this? Did you think you had to win it by employing curveballs to this Gladiators team? Did you have to get innovative in your mind?
Not really. We were just happy. We just played the comms now we think we're best for anything. Obviously, it probably looks like we're trying to cheese them when it starts on Busan Sanctuary and run out on like Ball, Larissa, Soldier.
Yes.
So that probably looks very much the opposite of what I'm saying. But generally, we were expecting to play him in a pretty straight up game. Obviously, Havana was exactly what we expected for Rush Mirror and a mirror on Volskaya as well. Going in, we were happy to play them in basically whatever mirror. And we were kind of confident in that, like we thought we could take them. So yeah, going into it, there wasn't really anything we were worried about, and we weren't trying to do anything super weird.
Okay. I don't know if you saw the reaction of some Overwatch League people to especially... It was interesting because the entire comp, like the Ana Zen Soldier Ball Orisa thing, like that is already weird. I think a lot of people focused on the Ana Zen specifically. But you said, okay, you guys consider this to be like the comp that actually works there. Can you explain how it functions and what the idea behind that comp is?
So Sanctuary is a bit of a weird map. Lots of these cough points are so sort of unique in how they're, or just so different from each other all the time. So Sanctuary is just a big circle. It's super wide, and it just allows us to take a lot of angles. And typically, because most teams play kind of what Gladiators played, right, with the Bulls and Sigma. So a lot of the time, it's actually very hard to push stuff with the backline like you normally would, say, if you were playing at comp on Volskaya or Blizzard World or something. So because it's so hard on Sanctuary, some of the logic is it's really hard for them to get on the backline anyway. So we'll just take the extra utility, and then it's just a good map for Soldier because he can run around, he can be annoying, he can do lots of things. And then the Orisa, I don't know how it started, but it just kept working because I think it's one of these things, sometimes stuff starts as a bit of a joke and then it just keeps working. And if the joke keeps working, eventually, if you can't figure out why it's not good or why why no one stopped it working, eventually maybe it's just good. So we started with that just because we wanted someone to stand on point. Like one of the surprising things, I guess, about the comp is that we actually flip the point all the time against like the normal meta on that map. So that's a really nice thing for it as well. So even though it started off a little bit silly, I think we kind of refined it and found out that most of the time it does work. Not today, unfortunately, which we're kind of hoping for. We were kind of saying to ourselves, we hope Sanctuary is the first round of the first map, because if they lose to that, that'll maybe mess with the mental a little bit, losing to that comp.
For sure, yeah. I guess a similar question would be, even though it isn't as out there, so to speak, is the Zarya Ball comps that you ran, I think, specifically on, if I recall correctly, you ran it on Volskaya second. How's the idea there? Because that is maybe something we would rather expect in another region to be played. Yes, we've seen it, but why did you choose that comp specifically?
So for us, we find it a lot easier to take the engage. Obviously, the Zarya Bubble enables so much. It enables peel, and if we can get our Zarya into a good position, she can just carry the fight. Versus Sig or especially versus D.Va versus any of the off-tanks. And it gives us so much more utility. And I think a particular strength of our roster on that comp is I think there's still a lot of weaknesses for a lot of main tanks on playing Bull. And we don't have that. I think Haddy's very good, especially, you stack him up against anyone. I think he's up there on Bull. And Shax is obviously, everyone knows how talented he is at Tracer. So it kind of leans into our strengths on the comp, allows us to get better engages. And we've just found it works nicer in quite a lot of situations.
And that Shax is an excellent Tracer. We also saw with the Hopium, if you want, on the last point, basically like almost having a little bit of a solo play with holding the points, stalling it out, actually getting kills as well. What was the green room saturation at that play like? Were you guys cheering that on, or was it already like, okay, the best we can do is draw it from here?
Yeah, well, it felt like a bit of it's one of those ones where you're watching it and you obviously have to play it out, but you're very aware, especially when you're not, obviously when the players themselves, they are just the next fight, win the next fight, the next play. But obviously when you're sitting back at it, you're sort of looking at it and you're like, okay, it's still a very difficult situation. To be fair though, I think our hold, if we had forced that into like another round and we had to full hold, I think it would have been pretty possible because I think our hold looked pretty good on the first point. So I was hoping, but it's so, especially on that comp, it's so volatile. especially on TCP, because it's so easy to lose a backliner to something a bit random, or one thing goes wrong, or one ult kills one person. But it really takes the wind out of your whole push, and you can't convert. So we really, especially because we needed the entire cap, we didn't have any ticks. It was always going to need to be like maybe a bit of a miracle in that last fight.
Right. Now, you guys also came into this season with a couple of unique, maybe not the only ones that had these challenges, but a couple of idiosyncratic like tendencies with the roster, both in terms of that you guys had a lot of rookies, as you mentioned, for play today, but also the ping situation that you guys have to play under. So I guess as a first question, how nervous were the rookies specifically? And did any of the veterans also get caught in that energy of just this being the first big stage match?
I think there was definitely a little bit of nerves. Like, I think when I look at our play, we're making mistakes. Like, what was it? The mecha base, we mess up our rollout, which is just one of those things.
Yep.
You know, we do it every day. It doesn't go wrong. Goes wrong the one day you need it not to.
Yeah.
Lots of other small things, people just not hearing. One person misses the key bit of information, right? Then someone goes down, and then the whole thing sort of snowballs from there.
Right.
So I think there were definitely some nerves. Like what I think we did today isn't what I'd characterize as a typical performance from us. Like, I think it was a lot below that. So we're definitely hoping for better next time.
Right. Now, the second aspect is that you guys are playing on ping. There is an argument to be made that because you then therefore play on consistent ping the entire season, that you will get used to it. I assume you've also been scrimming on that ping range, even though I think, from what I could gather, I think you guys were playing on a little bit higher ping during the practice sessions than you were in the eventual matches, because the match servers are routed differently or something. Is that true?
Well, yeah, it's been a bit of a mess, I guess. So originally we were told they were hoping they'd be able to get us to like a 90 to 110 ping range.
Right.
Which we were kind of skeptical of, but we said, if you can, go for it, please do. And then so what they did is they opened up one of esports client servers, so that teams could scrim on it, which would allow us to get the lower tick rate and the better routing.
Right.
And we never really got the ping that was advertised, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Some people did, like some people were pretty close. Unfortunately, the two people with the lowest ping are myself and Fisher, which is not what, like, me and Fisher both get sub 100 or like around about 100, but it changes a lot day to day, which is another weird thing.
Right.
But most of the players are around sort of 120 to 130, obviously a bit higher for Ripper because he's all the way out in Finland. Yeah. So it's not quite what we've been promised, and there's also been a few issues in terms of using it. So we've been using OPR a lot, which is what do you call it? Like the tournament realm that contenders use. But on that we get like 140 ping, so it's like even higher. So it's all been a little bit scuffed, really, in terms of getting that consistent practice. Like every day our ping's different, basically.
I remember last season that some teams told me that because their tank was on ping, for instance, that they could legitimately not run certain strategies because Ryan wasn't playable against people on small ping. Is this something that seriously impacts the strategical choices you have?
I'm not sure necessarily strategically, or at least not that we've encountered. Obviously, we've only like gone through this in one meta.
Right.
But I know certainly, especially when like with a rush mirror, like Haddy has to play differently than he would. Like, he is playing differently than he would play if he was playing on EU or playing on LAN. So yeah, so that's I guess in that sense it is a limitation, right? Because you have to sort of reinvent your play style a little bit to make it work. So yeah, that's tough. And there's certain things that just aren't as consistent, you know, like trying to think of another example. Just a lot of the projectile stuff, really. Lots of the reaction stuff.
What about Tracer?
Especially like on the Tracer, yeah, Tracer and May are probably the ones we've encountered the most because it's reaction time, right? Want the players to milk their ice block, to milk their recall as much as possible, and you have a much smaller window to operate on. So it just forces everyone to play slightly differently, and for some heroes it's not massive, but you multiply across 6 people,
For sure.
and it adds up. But it is what it is. We kind of knew what we signed up for, right? So
for sure. Now, during that match, were there any things that you really liked how the team reacted? Because sometimes there are matches that you lose, but a coach will be able to identify things that work really well and will find this sort of silver lining through it. Was it just like an underperformance across the board, or were there some aspects that you really liked?
I think the most important thing is that we kept our cool, right? It wasn't like people at each other's throats after 1 map, 2 maps. Like everyone stayed in control. Everyone kept cooling. Everyone played their game. Everyone supported each other all the way through, which is all you can ask, when a series is going this way. I think the fact that, again, I might be able to give you a better answer after we've watched the VODs back, but the fact that it felt like strategically we hadn't made any huge blunders or anything, just flat out didn't work. We're like, oh, we were never going to be able to win this doing this, or it didn't feel like they knew 10 things we didn't know. So in that sense, those were all positives for us, even though the performance wasn't. Yeah, like obviously Shax had a bit of a highlight spree at the end. There was some nice play. We had some nice ults. It's just a consistency thing. It's just these small things in between.
Sure. Now, looking ahead in the next match, we talked a little bit about the Outlaws, but that's a different situation than the Glads because they had Scrimbucks and they also went 2-0 and won against the San Francisco Shock. So are you counting on their hubris going to this match, or what's your strategy there?
So generally, we're expecting a lot of mirror matchups again. We saw, especially in the Shock block, they played a lot of Rush. Dante flexing onto the Sombra in some places. So we're expecting a lot of that for the most part, especially the maps we play, like Hanamura, Eichenwald, like they all lean into this as well. So I very much think the series will be won and lost there. I think for us, that's sort of our best case as well, right? If we could play the whole series on those type of maps, I think that's the best we could ask. So yeah, I think the chances are good. Obviously, they've proven themselves, right? I think the biggest thing for us is that regardless of a result, we don't lose because of the same reasons as we did today. Like that's the big jump. Like it's a lot of these games are going to be tough in Overwatch League for all the teams against all the teams.
Sure.
We want to just not lose the way we lost today.
Awesome. Then we wish you good luck into the next match, and thank you for the interview.
Oh, thank you.